Welcome, all you Sheehanites, to another special episode of Sheehan is Dead Comics. Tonight, we are interviewing the one and the only surfer boy hair, super cool guy, V Ken Marion. Okay. He's an artist currently for DC Comics, and looking forward to chatting him up. And if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe, hit the notifications. As you can probably tell, we're a smaller channel, but we're looking to keep growing. And in order to keep bringing you guys great guests, like Dan DiDio, Philip Kennedy Johnson, Dr. Drea, also Brad Anderson, Jason Fabic, and hopefully Jeff Johns in the future. Just putting that out there. Without further ado, we're going to have V Ken Marion.
You know, it's a micro program. You got to get at least a 6.
At least a 6. Here, check this out. You recall seeing the Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller, the cover?
Yes.
So check this out. This is Nicola Scott, who's my all-time favorite Wonder Woman artist. She did an Adam West one. This is fairly recent, from I think last month. Check this out. Check out how cool this is.
Oh wow. Yeah. Very
Isn't
cool.
that neat, dude?
Yeah.
That's Adam West, like, and the Dark Knight Returns. Like that's like peanut butter and vinegar, It's just, but it's really funny.
No, it's better.
Right? It's so cool. It's like, wow, that whoever thought of that's a genius idea. And the copy that they sent me from this comics, I gotta shout them out on eBay. I forgot. Thing is in great condition. I was eyeing it and I was like, man, this thing's got to be like at least a 9.4. And then let me tell you about how cool this is. So Justice Society. This is the book. That was a trade dress, of course. Super cool. It's written by the man, the myth, the legend, Jeff Johns. Be like, do me a favor, put the microphone on mute because this is going to be riveting.
Yeah.
Huevos and chevos. And it's also drawn by Michael Yanin, who the art is really good. Dude, as I sent you, I audibly gasped when I saw Marionette. I went like that. No joke, no joke. Look who else is in it. So you got their new baby. You got Boobastis. And then remember the kid who was like the Dr. Manhattan boy at the end?
Yeah.
I believe that's him. It reminds me of in Doomsday Clock when they were in the winter, in the snow. So it's Boobastis. Like, I don't know if that's Ozymandias again or what. Super cool.
I have to say that artwork definitely is channeling the original too.
Right. And Michael Yanin, his art is really amazing. I mean, it's moody, it's expressive. This also picks up on the tales. I haven't read it yet, but I have the book Batman Catwoman, Tom King. It's basically a Catwoman story, but it picks up in the future after his run. And they have a daughter named Helena, who's the new huntress. And so that picks up traces of that, and she's the main character in this. I'm on the second issue. I think it's a 12-issue miniseries. And I think number 12 just came out recently. So the second trade should be out in a few months. A couple of old duels, you know what I mean?
Or maybe some wine coolers.
Yeah. A couple of old duels and some, Taco Bell.
You're not going to like this.
No, you're not.
This is going to make you think of a David Cronenberg film. We don't really want to go there. Hey there.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good. How are you, buddy?
Good. Oh, thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
I've heard you for many episodes on Digging for Kryptonite with Anthony.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I'm very familiar with your enthusiasm for Zack Snyder's movies.
The Snyder movies are great. I think that people give them like too much crap. I really wish that that they kept them going and that they weren't being rebooted. Like I understand like why they did it. I will say I actually like Robert Pattinson's Batman more than Ben Affleck though.
Yeah.
Like I really like the new Batman universe they're doing. And so like if the casualty of that of losing the Snyder stuff is that we got the Robert Pattinson thing, then like I'm happy with that too, Like I really loved his take on Superman, Snyder's take on Superman. And like I know it wasn't for everyone. I just like the dialing up the action, like because I feel like Superman he is my favorite character, and like I feel like he should be the world's favorite character, and I think I thought for a long time that a part of that is that I feel like people write him, they almost like nerf him a little bit in terms of like when it comes to the action. Now, like I do think to a degree the Zack Snyder stuff kind of nerfed his compassion a little bit too much, or like his like the emotional heart. Like I feel like the perfect Superman's somewhere in the middle, where like he's got like a lot of heart and he's really selfless and he cares for everyone around him, and that all comes through. But he also can throw down when he needs to, And I feel like that's kind of like the perfect Superman that like I feel like we've never quite had. Like I feel like Christopher Reeve was perfect, but the limitations of like film
Mm.
back then, like his fight with Zod is like not that great, because like it's just like it's an 80s movie and they didn't figure out how to do all this cool stuff yet. So like but I feel like I'm optimistic. Like I hope the new one is good. I really do hope the new one's good.
Yeah.
I do too, but dude, that suit too, like when they zoom in on it and people on X are like, oh my God, this suit is so beautiful. It's the best. And then there's like crinkles on the elbow. I'm like, what is this? Is this like a fireman suit? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I'm not super stoked about the suit. Like I don't know what they're gonna do, how it's gonna look in film. Like, I mean, we're all kind of Monday morning quarterbacking it when we see these images and stuff, but like I think it's odd to do the new 52 designs, but then give them the underwear as well. Like, I think that's like a weird combo to do. Like, either go full classic or like go full modern. Like, I think it's a strange kind of middle ground. And
Mm.
I've on Anthony's show, I've said many times that in real life, I don't think the underwear really works that well. Like, I think I thought Henry Cavill's like suit was fine. Like, I didn't have any issue with that. But like I can understand why people want the classic look though. So like I don't begrudge that either. Like if they can make it look cool, go for it. The new suit, I'm really kind of trying to reserve judgment until we see like a trailer or something. Like I know a lot of my friends have been saying that it looks like a Six Flags costume, which I think is kind of funny. But who
Yeah,
knows?
yeah,
We'll see
yeah.
what
I've
it looks
seen
like.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
I
Six
have to
Flags.
say, as the old man here in the room, that Superman 2's battle was actually like just for, I don't know how old I was, 12 or something. It was amazing for the time.
Oh, I don't doubt that. Yeah, I totally don't doubt
I
that.
mean, it
My
hasn't
my
aged that well, but at the time I was like, oh my goodness, this is so amazing.
Look
Oh,
at
dude, for sure, for sure.
look at Superman throw that sewer top and
Yeah,
hit
yeah,
Zod,
right, right.
and
Yeah.
look, the big
Yeah.
Coca-Cola sign, and it explodes.
Because at that point, I think Star Wars had come out, right? But like space fantasy is kind of a whole different sell than like action in human bodies, things that are very much that we're dialed into and kind of know what they
Yeah.
look like versus spaceships, which can kind of be like almost whatever, as long as there's not
Mhm.
any major gaffes. So to see like live action stuff that kind of was able to pull it over was pretty exciting at the time.
Oh, I don't doubt that at all. My connection to Superman 2, like so Superman 1, I watched like a million times growing up because we had the VHS, but Superman 2 I hadn't seen until I was like I want to say like 18 or 19. So
Oh
like my
yeah,
connection to Superman 2 is like and that was
yeah,
at that point we were like it was like right when Superman Returns was coming out. It's the first time I saw Superman 2 really in full.
yeah.
And like
Oh,
that was kind of like at that point we had Spider-Man, we had X-Men. So like it never connected with me the same way it connects with other people. But like I totally understand like if you were at that age when or not even at that age, if you were just like saw it when it came out, like I totally
Right.
understand how that would connect with you. Because like Rocketeer is one of my favorite movies of all time. And like
Okay.
I fully admit that like you watch it now, the effects like aren't they don't hold up to what they do now. But like for me it's like that's one of my top five movies of all time. It's like from my childhood, and
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. Cool, cool.
somebody put a picture of the Nuclear Man from Superman 4 on X the other night, and I messaged Anthony, and I'm like, dude, this was my Thanos when I was a kid. Like he was like, oh my God, he hurt Superman. He like scratched his neck, and Superman had to like call out sick for a week. Like he was
yeah.
terrifying as a kid. Like the Nuclear Man was terrifying. So it was
I mean
funny.
I think Superman 4 is better than Superman 3.
Those
I
movies
have
are rough. Those,
Yeah, yes, yes, yes.
I have not seen Superman. I couldn't even tell you what happened in Superman 3 exactly. But I love Superman 2, and I actually got the Richard Donner cut on the stream. Have you seen that one, Ken?
I have, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So like that was cool, and I was like, oh man, this is like this is like the Snyder cut, right? So I watch it, and then like there's that like real fast like it's like the movie comes to a halt, and then it's like what is it? It's the it's Lois Lane and it's Clark, but it's almost like audition vibes. And she
Hmm.
like pops the gun at him, and then all of a sudden we like pick up, and it's like, what just happened? Like,
Mm.
I think that was the audition. I think that was like the filmed audition that they stitched in there.
yeah, yeah, but it just comes like at this awkward time, and it's like, wait a minute, huh? Like,
Yeah.
okay,
Were they
yeah,
scrapping for footage, you think? I mean, because obviously that film, the Donner Cut, was pieced together later, you know?
yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was kind of like maybe like, hey, it's like a novelty, like, hey, look at this novelty. But it didn't even really play into the story. It just kind of appeared that, and it had like maybe a little trace of it, but it was completely
Hmm.
unnecessary. It's just kind of like, hey, look what we shot. Check this out.
Yeah.
It would have been better maybe as like an after credits. I don't know, but I digress. I digress.
Yeah.
But I find that funny that you saw Superman when you were a kid on VHS, but not Superman 2. So for me, I saw Superman 1 on VHS, and then when I was like, oh my God, there's another one I can watch. And I like watched that right away. And I was like, oh my God, there's another one I can watch. And then I watched three. And then, the fourth one came out. It was like, oh my God, you could watch all four back to back to back to back. So
Mm.
yeah, but
Nice.
Superman 2 was my jam. I remember like reading Superman comics as a boy and like watching Superman 2 at the same time. It was like the coolest thing. So,
That's
do
awesome.
do
That's
you do
awesome.
you do you have anything like that growing up? Like that tickled you that way?
Like with like comics at the same time as the movies.
Yeah,
Like,
like something that just enthralled you was like, "Oh my
oh,
God."
oh, I mean, yeah, I mean, Rocketeer, like I said, I mean, Superman the movie enthralled me, Rocketeer enthralled me, and Hook. Do you remember the movie Hook with the
Yes,
Robin
excellent
Williams,
Sure.
movie.
Peter
So
Mayhew?
underrated. So
Yeah,
underrated.
that like growing up, like I wanted to be Rufio. Like he was the first character that like I remember thinking like this guy's awesome. Like I want to be like this guy. So like I ripped my jeans like Rufio, and like I started skateboarding because of Rufio. Like so that was like the first like I remember I don't know, I had to be like 3 or 4 when that came out. Yeah. I had all the action figures from it at Christmas. My parents gave me all the action figures from the movie. So that was huge for me. And also Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves was big.
Oh yeah.
And
Costner.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think. Yeah, and then Superman and Rocketeer. Those were like kind of like my big when I was like super, super young. And then obviously the Batman cartoon show and the X-Men cartoon show were
Mm.
also just like huge at that like super young formative age,
Hmm. Hmm.
When, if you don't mind me asking, when were you born?
87.
87. All right. So I was born in
Yeah.
82. And like when I started collecting comics was when I remember my parents being like, "Hey, Superman's gonna die," and I'm like, "What?" And they were reading it in the New York Newsday, and I'm like,
I
"I
remember
what?"
that.
And then trying to get the comic, like that's when I found out as a boy that like comics sell out, and I
Yeah.
was like, "What do you mean I can't buy the comic? I want to read how Superman dies." So I had to pre-order Superman Funeral for a Friend. And
Hmm.
then like that's when all of a sudden DC did like Nightfall. And so I was kind of almost on the ground floor with Nightfall. And so like this that really solidified my comic collecting was Nightfall. And then I just went like full bore into like everything. How about you? Was there anything that like really stapled your your comic collecting or fandom?
For comic books, yeah.
Mhm.
So I do remember Superman dying. I wasn't My parents never really bought me comic books growing up. In like so when I heard about Superman dying, my dad was a big Superman fan, and so he read about it in the newspaper. And like a friend of a friend, like my dad's friend's son, actually had the issue, but he didn't open it, so I could just see it. So I just saw it in the plastic, so I didn't actually read it. I just saw the black bag, and he's like, "This is gonna be worth $1 million. We can't open it." Um, but like I got so like I was always into the characters mainly through the action figures and stuff. Like that was how I was introduced to all these characters. Like in the 90s, they're called DC superheroes and Marvel superheroes by Toy Biz, and like they're like kind of like reprints of the superpowers, and that's kind of how I discovered who all these characters were, and obviously the cartoon shows and stuff. But when I was like around fourth grade or so, I there was a comic store in our area. My dad was like, "Oh, you like drawing? You like superheroes? We should go to a comic book store." And so I remember like the first books I picked up were Silver Surfer, because again, like the surfing, skateboarding thing, I just thought he was cool on the board. And then Kyle Rayner Green Lantern, because I just thought he like because I knew Green Lantern, like the Hal Jordan Green Lantern, because I had the figure, but I thought this new Green Lantern just looked so cool. And he's like, this guy's so dope. So like I had a couple issues of that, a couple issues of Silver Surfer, and then like we'd randomly go back and then like Steel. I got into Steel at that point too because I thought Steel looked really cool, and it was just kind of like a sporadic thing that kind of every once in a while I go to the comic store, and then it wasn't really till high school that like I just kind of like what was this? How did it even begin? I think it was because I was supposed to go to basketball camp and I sprained my ankle right before, and so like I couldn't go. So like I was trying to look for things to do that like weren't like I could do like just sitting around like while my ankle was healing. And I was like, oh man, I really like drawing. I really like comics. Like I'm gonna go to a comic book store and like I picked up a Wizard magazine at the store and I was kind of like I picked up X-Men and Spider-Man, just like random stuff that was like I remember from a kid liking. And it was there's an article in this Wizard magazine that was talking about who is Hush. And it was like midway through the Batman Hush run.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, this looks cool. This art looks cool. Like it looks like a mystery. Like this art looks cool. This looks like those X-Men comics like when I was a kid, like that look. Like I didn't know who Jim Lee was. I just knew that look. And I was like, this is like that look that I wish all comics looked like. So I went back to the comic store and I picked up, it was like toward the end of the run. It was like the Ra's al Ghul issue of Hush. And like I just got like immediately enthralled with it. And I was like, I want to do this. Like I want to draw like this. I want to tell stories like this. I want to like make books that hook people like this. Cause I read one issue of it and I was like, who's Hush? Who is Hush? This is crazy. I need to know. I need to know. So
Mm.
that was what totally like hooked me into like collecting comics.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, man. I appreciate that. I remember when it was announced because I didn't know who Jim Lee was either until Wizard, like told me who Jim Lee was. And
Mhm.
I was like, wait a minute, did Jim Lee that drew these X-Men comics and like they made a huge deal about it is going to draw a Batman? What? And so I started a subscription like just as that came out, Batman 608. So I was
Oh,
like right there.
nice.
Yeah, yes. They were coming in the mail, and I mean the mail was like, they'd come in like dented and whatnot. So that
Mhm.
like freaked me out when I was a kid. But reading the stories was amazing. And I'm being like, oh my God, this is so cool. And I love Jim Lee's art. I loved it. So
That's awesome.
I
So
yeah.
you got 608. That was your first one in your subscription that came in the mail.
Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome.
It was perfect timing because it took them, back then it was all like you mail it in, it was done manually.
Yeah,
So it like I don't even remember when I mailed it in, but it started perfectly on time. And I was like, wow, this is so cool.
that's
Um,
awesome. Yeah, I had a subscription to Green Lantern in high school and like through the mail like that. And it was I got it for Christmas from my parents, and it was it was like toward the end of the Kyle Rayner run. So I had like about a year of it. It was like I think it was Judd Winnick. I want to say it was Judd Winnick and Dale Eaglesham who were working on it, but it was like they had like a good chunk of it, and then it switched to Ron Mars, and it was like the wrap up of that series. And then it said, "This is the last issue of Green Lantern." I'm like, "Wait! Last issue? I still have like 3 issues left of my subscription." And I remember calling up DC and being
uh,
like,
What's
"Hey,
the
like
deal?
I called the number, and I was like, I was like 14, 15, whatever, and I was like, "What's
oh,
the deal
sure.
with this?" And they're like, "Oh, well, there's going to be a new series starting up, and you'll just be rolled over to that." I'm like, "Okay." And so like in that rollover was Green Lantern Rebirth, and I got that in the mail. That was pretty cool.
Dude, that's
Because
awesome.
so I didn't know what was happening. Like I didn't
Oh,
know
sure.
like because I wasn't plugged
I
in, you know it.
dude, I'm there with you. I would have been like, huh? What? Like
Yeah.
I remember when the Emerald Twilight came out and like the when Hal Jordan went crazy as Parallax and there was a glow in the dark one. And then the Kyle Rayner one, there was a glow in the dark one, like his debut. And I remember like having that and like constantly bagging and boarding it and just being like this, trying to, see the glow in
Nice.
the dark. I was all about it. So I feel you on that.
Nice.
I feel you. Now your style though, you draw it's almost like Jim Lee mixed with manga and like manga crazy manga. Is that fair? I mean, and I don't
Oh,
use
thank you.
crazy.
Yeah.
I don't use crazy as, a bad term. It's just like it's
Yeah.
intense, maybe. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that
I was looking at the stuff that you had on or is on the Kickstarter page, and I hadn't really seen your work before that. And I said to Brian, I said, man, this guy is like all about the 90s. This is like totally influenced by the 90s. And I'm like, am I wrong? And he's like, no, I think you're right.
Yeah.
oh, thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. Yeah. I mean that you guys distilled my kind of like what I'm trying to capture pretty much perfectly. Like, because at the same time I was getting into comics and stuff like that growing up, I was also huge into like Toonami era anime and like video games and like stuff like that. So like when I was at the perfect age when that stuff kind of came over to the States, like Dragon Ball Z and Gundam Wing and Final Fantasy and
Mm.
all these things now that are kind of like staples of like the foundation of anime that we think of in American culture. Like I was like there in middle school when it was like popping off. So I was like at the perfect age where it was like just hit.
Yeah.
And so like that was a huge, just that sort of confluence. And I think one of the reasons I really gravitate toward like Jim Lee and like Mark Silvestri and like Rob Liefeld and Joe Madden, all those guys from the 90s is that they were kind of at the forefront of that.
Mhm.
They were like, they were aware of anime and manga before we were, and they were very influenced in their style of that. So
Mhm.
like, and that what I'm trying to capture with my work now is like I want to make the kind of books, and you brought my Kickstarter like with the story that I wrote and then drawing like, and with this my work with DC too is like what I'm trying to capture is that feeling that I had when I was like 14, 15 years old, like watching anime, playing video games, and reading comic books, and like that kind of mix of like the Jim Lee, Michael Turner kind of mix with like the Dragon Ball Z style, the anime style, like the Gundam style, like all that kind of that's kind of like my sweet spot of like both nostalgia and excitement. And like I'm just trying to make my work and my pages like as dynamic and as like fluid and as exciting and fun as possible. And just kind of like for that like half hour that you're reading my book, like you're kind of being transported back to being a kid and just having fun.
Well, I think you pull
Beautiful.
it off because I definitely see the composition in the panels and stuff as far as the action, and it's just like, oh man, it's definitely to for me, it's just like a throwback. I was just like, wow, this is just like totally nailing it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Everything you just said to me, I had to put my head down and catch myself because I literally wanted to like, I don't know. I've never been to a Backstreet Boys concert. I'm not a fan, but I felt like a 15-year-old girl listening to like a love song from the Backstreet Boys. Like I'm like, oh my God, yes, Ken, that's beautiful. Like that, no one has ever expressed it like that. What you just said. I want people to feel like they're 14, they're reading comics, they're watching the things, they're like into it. And I've never heard anybody explain it like that, but that's something that I would want to do. And and when comics touch me as a 42-year-old man, at certain points, like even the other night, I was telling Scott, I'm reading. Have you read JSA by the new JSA yet by Jeff Johns?
I have not caught up on that
Uh,
one yet. No,
okay, so
I'm really behind on modern books.
no, me too, me too. I buy the trades, and so I waited for
Hmm.
this to come out, and I saw he's got a couple of references to Doomsday Clock in it, and I've not seen the characters since then, and I went, like
Mm.
this, and I literally was caught by that. So I love your whole expression and what you want to put in people's hearts when they read your work. I love that, man. That's so cool. I have so much respect for you, for so much more respect for you. That's beautiful.
Oh,
I love
thank
it.
you.
I love it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank
No,
you.
really, like you captured everything. Like I can't even what you just said. I can't even articulate. Like why? What am I looking for when I'm reading comics? Like that's what I want. I want that. Like that feeling. So that's beautiful, dude. I love that. I just love that so much. That's probably one of my favorite, if not one of my favorite clips since we've been doing this for like a year and a half. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thank
Um,
you. Thank you.
no, thank you. Thank you. That was so awesome. Um, now as regards that, what do you listen to or watch like while you're drawing? Like are you listening to like an Akira soundtrack or Blade Runner soundtrack? Like what are you doing? Like what gets you
So
going? You're like, yeah, I'm gonna rock this.
I listen to two things when I work. Well, actually three things. One, I'm either talking on the phone with someone. So I'm either like talking to my one of my friend Andrew Dahlhaus, who's a frequent collaborator. He's an amazing colorist. Me and him talk on the phone a lot. Or some of my friends from college or from high school, like we'll chat. So that will kill a few hours like while I'm working. But the other two big ones that I do are podcasts. So
Mm.
I'll go through like phases where like I listen to like a ton of podcasts. But then like I'll also hit a wall at that and then I'll listen to music. And like for me, music, huge, huge, huge for me. And it's very similar to my ethos with what I'm drawing is I pretty much like I pretty much listen to the music that I listened to when I was growing up. And it's like for me, it's like all about like punk and pop punk stuff. So it's like Blink 182, Sum 41, All Time Low. And like and there's been like a big resurgence of it now with like bands like with like Machine Gun Kelly and Jaden and Kenny Hoopla and these like newer acts too. So it's like it's really cool that like a lot of these bands that I grew up listening to, like they're influencing new people now, and they're also those classic bands are still making stuff. So like All Time Low and Boys Like Girls and all these. You guys might not know who any of these bands are, but like they're like huge in like the Warp Tour, like skateboarding kind of like scene. So that was like what I grew up with, and that's like my jam when it comes to music.
Okay, so I appreciate that, and I know Blink 182, all the small
Yeah. Oh yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they were big when I was in high school. I remember them. I actually saw a
Mhm.
picture of them now, like last week on X, and I'm like, wow, they still
They're
kind
still
of look
together.
pretty. Yeah, they
Yeah.
look pretty
That's
similar.
cool.
Now
We just saw them.
you
Did
saw
you?
them?
Yeah, we saw them. They sold out City Field. Like they're huge now. They're like the biggest like band, one of the biggest bands in the world now. It's crazy.
Still,
Like they're
huh?
selling out
Still,
arenas.
yeah,
Yeah.
That's cool.
still jamming.
Yeah.
Um, and well, that explains your hair too, because you got Blink 182 hair, man. You do. And
Yeah.
that's like I'm like, okay, Blink 182, the hair, I get it. Everything else that you mentioned, I don't know those. I don't know those.
Yeah.
But I
They're
did know Blink.
definitely they're of the late 90s, early 2000s, that kind of era of
Yeah.
like rock music. Yeah.
Now
But
you
like
did mention go
I need
ahead.
like fast like so when I'm drawing like I need like which is opposite of like a lot of artists I talk to. I need like fast, high energy music. Like that's why I like that kind of style of music so much. I like punk and pop punk because like that's super fast, super like eighth notes, like really like high energy because that like makes me go at high energy. And like if I listen to like say like slower music, like I do like so, like the Beatles or something, like that will slow me down and actually like make me take longer to draw stuff. So like I've realized over the years that like I need if I do go into music mode, it needs to be something that like is like high energy and fast. I can like sing along to it and just kind of like gets me like physically moving faster.
Hmm.
No, I dig it. I dig it. Have you worked yet in your career with Sandra Hope?
I'm not. No, I want to. She's amazing. She's like one of the best thinkers around.
So
Yeah.
we had her on, I don't know, like 4 months ago.
I think
And
it was
I
less
was
than that even. It
less than that. I'm like, listen, do me a favor. I don't what's like to me, and I say this with respect, I have to be
was only
very
2 months
gentle.
ago.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I had to be very careful because I didn't want to be insulting. I'm like, an anchor to me is a tracer. Like you're going over it, you're adding little cliff notes to things and whatnot. And she's like ready to jump through the screen and choke me, right? But she would have been very gentle because she's so sweet.
She was
And
sweet.
and she's like, no. She goes, an anchor wants to capture the energy of the artist. So what I have in front of me, I want to replicate that energy. And I was just like, right? Because I was like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
oh my goodness, that makes so much sense. I get it. And so maybe you want to tell whoever's inking you, you could be like, hey, I listened to Blink 182. I listened to this and I listened to that. I would suggest you listen to that while you do this. Maybe that'll help you capture the energy. So
Yeah. I actually
Speaking of,
started inking myself.
I was
you
going to
did,
Like
say,
around COVID. Yeah.
okay.
speaking of that, looking at some things I wrote down here from your project, Battle Chronicle, I didn't see credits for an anchor, so I take it you are inking.
Yeah, I'm inking myself. Yeah. I
Yeah.
started it during COVID, just because, lockdown happened and like the logistics of shipping stuff around got harder and like, like professional work slowed down. So I started doing commissions. I just started like getting more into the flow of it. And like, I got to a point where like I feel like I can actually pencil and ink faster than if I just tightly penciled.
Hmm.
Because like my inking and I feel like my work's changed in a lot of ways that like I personally feel like there's more energy to it now because I can be so much looser with the pencils that like I can translate that energy kind of it feels like it's like removing a step almost to get to that final look and like
You're not having to translate for someone else because you know what the information is that you want to capture.
Mhm.
Is that basically it? It's like so I can be
Pretty
a little
much, yeah.
easier with pencils because I know what I'm going to do with the inks.
Pretty much, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And like and I can like because how I worked in the past when I just penciled, like I would basically do like roughs and then erase the roughs, the needed eraser, and then go in tight, right? And so now I'm doing the roughs and then just going in with ink. So it's like removing that one step of tightness, and because each time you add a step, you bring the energy down. Like each
Mhm.
time you go tighter, each time you add a step in the process, the energy gets less and less and less. So like by removing that one step, I feel like the energy is still there. Now, I have not worked with an inker yet where I would just send like the stage that I do now where I got like this sort of like looser, more energy pencils. I haven't worked with an inker yet where like I gave them that. So like if like I was to work with like Sandra and like give her just like straight up like what I would ink off of, I'd be really really interested to see like what her interpretation of that would
Hmm.
be because she's like an amazing inker. So
Is that kind of like taking a leap of faith to some extent?
it definitely is. Yeah, it definitely like particularly for me like, and I'm not perfect at it. Like, but like I always like the thing that I really want to get super beautiful are the faces. Like that's the thing. Like the eyes and the faces are like
Hmm.
so like that's where if I'm gonna go tight, like that's where it's gonna go into the like the faces and expressions. So like yeah, and then with the shading, the shadowing, the cross hatching, all the kind of like energy lines, it definitely is like because if I'm gonna give an anchor that sort of stage where things are rough, it's like it's rough, you know, it's like it's not super exactly like this is where you're gonna do what. So
Hmm.
it would be like interesting to see like what the result would be.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's so cool, man. So cool.
Commentary at all of Jim Lee and is it Scott Williams? Because they were like, I mean, like Jim's best stuff a lot of times when Scott was inking, right?
Oh yeah, for
And
sure.
and
Yeah.
so is that the result of a long-term relationship? I mean, I don't know. I just would like to hear your thoughts on those kinds of, John Byrne, Terry Austin, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the longer you work with an anchor, the more they get comfortable with you and you get comfortable with them. And like Jim's actually a really good example of what I was just saying because like his pencils, like they're tight in the sense that all the information's there, but they're not like he's erasing them and then doing that extra step. Like his pencils definitely, if you look at his pencils for like Hush or Superman or whatever, they do have a lot of that energy still there. You know what I mean? That like sort of that those straight lines and the kind of like the movement is all still there. So like those guys work together so well and so much together that like Scott's able to interpret that in a really great way and he's able to tighten it up while keeping all that energy. Like I
Hmm.
think they're like the gold standard of like the comic art kind of like
Hmm.
team, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Them
Yeah.
and then Michael Turner and his colors Peter Steigerwald, I think, were like the other gold standard. Like those guys are just amazing.
Okay.
Michael Turner.
Cool. Interesting.
Pour some out from Michael Turner. I loved his Batman, Superman, Supergirl.
So good.
Gorgeous.
So
And
good. Yeah.
when I first years ago was like, oh my God, they have an absolute edition to this. It was like, oh my God, like in the king size and just what a treat. What a treat.
Well, his pencils are kind of like what I was doing. If you did you see that in the absolute? Like just what his pencils look like? Did you ever see like because he's the opposite. He's what I used to do. He's very very tight. Like he's like that's actually I actually started like the majority of my career with Aspen Comics, and so like I worked with them for a very long time. I worked in Fathom. I did Soulfire. I did a book called Journey, which is like this fantasy book with them, and like
That's
I
right up your
was
alley.
yeah, yeah, no, it was blast. Like Aspen, amazing guys, and like they really mentored me a lot in, coming into the industry and like showing me like how to do things. And like they saw that I was very influenced by Michael Turner. And like I remember Frank Mastromaro, the president of Aspen, he like was explained to me how Mike would like do a rough, then erase it, then kind of tighten it up. And like Mike did all these extra steps, and Mike kept a lot of that energy in his work. So, and they colored right off his pencils. They didn't use an inker in like the second half of his career. Yeah, like all that DC stuff, there's no inker. It's just like right off his pencils.
Wow.
Wow,
That's
dude, that's
amazing.
amazing. That
Yeah.
is amazing. I've never heard that before, and I'm like super geek,
Yeah,
like I've watched, like so many YouTube channels. I've never heard anybody say that or read that. Thank you for sharing that. That's
yeah, no,
amazing.
yeah. I mean,
That's
his
amazing.
early his Top Cow stuff had inkers, but it was like once they made Aspen Comics, once he left Top Cow, and like they did, I think it was I want to say it was Fathom Volume 3, but I'm not, or 2. It's like the last part that he drew Fathom, and then Soulfire, and then all his Batman and DC stuff and all his Marvel stuff. Like that was there's no inker. It was just right off his pencils. Yeah.
That's
Dude, that's
cool.
amazing. You
I
just
see
blew.
Artie Adams in there and I see Michael Golden for sure. It's
In Turner's
gorgeous.
pencils
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah. In the finished work that I'm looking at here.
yeah, his stuff is
I
gorgeous.
see that in
That's
full.
that's one we'll have to talk about one day is the Superman, Batman, Supergirl. It's gorgeous. One of my
Oh
favorite
yeah.
stories. And they made a cartoon movie on it too, which was cool. And
Hmm.
they did a solid job honoring the style, I think. So
Yeah, totally. I
yeah.
feel like they captured his work in an animated way pretty well.
Yeah, especially with like he was famous, really famous for the way he drew women too. And
Hmm.
felt like
I was gonna
his
say his women are amazing.
Yeah, his Supergirl was captured beautifully, I thought, like perfect in the DC animated stuff. That was way cool.
I
Dude,
think
thank you
his
for
men were a little bulky, but that doesn't matter.
He's
That's
like
my impression.
I remember Frank told me that he was a big like a lot of his influence came from like fashion illustration. So like in like
from what?
like
What was that?
like fashion illustration, like the
Fashion.
proportions
Okay.
of like the
Gotcha.
proportions. And
Right.
like this like the standard proportion for like a human is I think it's 8 heads high, I want to say. Like it's like 8 heads high. But like Mike would draw them 10 heads high because he wanted
Yeah.
them to look like taller and longer and stuff. So that always like spoke to me because I'm like a tall, lanky guy. So like that always like connected with me that he drew like these like really tall, like kind of characters. So
I think that's where I'm getting kind of the Artie Adams vibe and maybe some Liam Sharp in there too, because they
oh
tended to,
totally, yeah.
yeah, lean into that also a little bit.
See, I got the tall, lanky part because you mentioned basketball. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. What are you pushing? Six what?
I'm 6'4".
I
Whoa.
mean, I'm like 6'4",
Yeah.
6'5". So we'll see each other at Comic-Con, God
Nice,
willing. I'll
nice.
be there on Friday, the 18th. So,
Nice, nice. Yeah,
and
I will be there.
all right, and I got to tell you, I really like. I'm so moved by what you said earlier, where I freaked out. Like, I want to hug you when I see you. So if I if I could hug you, like, and I'm a hetero male, but I mean, like, I just love what you said. I just, so
Well, you better
plus,
get
Well,
permission
thank you.
from Philip Kennedy before you hug anyone else because he might get
well,
jealous.
he won't be there, so he won't
Oh,
see.
he's not going to
Plus,
be there,
Philip's really short, so
but he'll
like,
still, he's your hugger guy.
yeah, I'd be like, if you were shorter, I'd be like, Ken, do you mind if I hug you and pick you up? Is that okay? But being able to like hug someone who's my eye length, that's cool. Like I'm serious too. Like I'm gonna be so happy to see you. And I'm gonna that what you said is gonna pop like right in my brain. That was awesome, man. I
Oh,
really appreciated it.
oh,
Really
thanks, man.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Like we
Are
can
you
end
based
right
in New York?
now. We can end right now, and you made this completely worth it for me. So thank you.
Are you in White Plains?
Yeah, how did you know?
It was online somewhere.
Oh,
You know how that is.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
So I'm in
yeah.
Hudson. I'm in Hudson.
Oh, nice, nice,
He
So
knows
we're
he
nice.
barely a stone's throw away. Brian used to be in Hudson and he's up in Albany.
Yeah, I'm in Albany.
Oh, nice. My best friend lives in Albany.
Mhm.
So
Scott knows what hair product you use too. So he's
nice.
like,
Lanza.
how
I
did
do
you
my
know?
homework, you know what I'm saying?
That's cool, man. Yeah, you said City Field, so I figured you live somewhere close. So
Yeah, yeah, just outside the city. Yeah, we used to live in Brooklyn. For
Brooklyn.
like I lived for like a very long time because I went to college in Brooklyn, and then right around COVID is when we headed out because they tried raising the rent and it just didn't seem worth it anymore.
Yeah.
No, sure. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So, do you take the train to Comic Con when you go, or
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah, me
yeah.
too.
My wife works in the city too, so she takes the train in like whenever she has to go into the office.
Now you're what, 2 years you've been married now?
Yeah, gonna be 2 years coming up. Yeah,
Congratulations, man. That's
thank
beautiful.
you, thank you,
I really appreciate that. I remember you announced that on Anthony's show, and I was like, oh, good for Ken. That's awesome. It's beautiful.
yeah, thank you,
So, no,
thank you. Yeah.
really, and you look happy still, so good for you.
Oh yeah, the
Yeah.
happiest I've ever been. Yeah.
Ah, that dude, that's beautiful. Your wife, she should be like, hey, listen, about 30 minutes into this interview, I want to kiss for this one. She'd be like, oh, you're so sweet. That's beautiful, man. And like to see the juice on your face, like you're so in love. I'm very happy for you. That's wonderful. Good for you. Now,
Thank you.
thank you. As regards what you're working on now, what do you got going on for All In? Like what do they
So
got you doing?
I don't think I can talk about it yet because it hasn't been
Oh, it's been
announced.
announced.
It has not. I don't think it's been announced yet. But it's with one of my favorite writers working right now, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And it's with a
No,
character that
no
people
names.
associate me with.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I totally would say. I don't want to get in trouble. So
No, that's
I mean,
No,
I'm sure they'll
that's
announce
fair.
it.
understood.
Yeah.
Respect.
How
Respect.
about your Kickstarter project? How's that coming along? Are you still shooting for December?
Yeah, so you brought it up, thank you. My creator-owned book is called Battle Chronicle Soul Striker for anyone who isn't aware. It's a fantasy sci-fi superhero kind of mashup blend. And we did a Kickstarter in May. We ran the Kickstarter and we were successfully funded. And then we now have a second round, a second chance campaign for those who missed out on Indiegogo right now. That's actually still active. It's in demand right now. So if anyone wants to go, Google Battle Chronicle Soul Striker and go to the Indiegogo page, and yeah, you can check out all the things that are available. We are targeting a December ship date. Might be pushed back though because Andrew he's been really busy. He had to take a bunch of gigs during the fall here, so the coloring is a little behind schedule. But if it doesn't come in December, it will come in either January or February. So it's all written, it's drawn, it's with the color, it's with Andrew right now for colors. And we're also producing all the merch too. So we're putting in the orders now for the t-shirts and the prints
There you
and all
go,
that
merch.
stuff. So,
All right,
Cool.
yeah.
Are you gonna be selling merch at Comic-Con?
Not for any of the Soul Striker stuff, just because like we want everyone, like we want the backers to get their stuff first before everyone else. So
Okay, fair.
I'll have my own, like I've got prints and stickers and stuff that I do with my own work or in my own character of like, DC, Marvel, anime, stuff like that. But all Soul Striker stuff, we want the backers to be the first to get all this stuff. So
No, that's beautiful, man. Good. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes
Was that the first Kickstarter that you had done? I can't remember from watching.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the first one where I was in control of it, I was part of a project called Death Shroud a couple years ago that did an Indiegogo campaign, but I was a hired artist for that, so I was contributing to the creator. His name's Chad Larson. He was the one who wrote the story and ran the campaign and hired me to come on board, and that was a great campaign and great concept. So check that out too, listeners. Death Shroud's really cool. But yeah, this is the first one that I was like, I co-wrote this story with my friend Jason Matthews, and I ran the whole campaign, and I'm going to be the one shipping everything out. So this is the first time like I'm kind of in the driver's seat. So definitely learned a lot going through the process. It was a lot more than I anticipated in terms of like time and stuff, and the commitment of like what it was actually going to take took a lot more time than what I was anticipating. But I definitely think it's like this. I'm so proud of this book. I think it's the best work I've ever done, and I'm hoping it's going to be the first chapter in what's going to be a very kind of long running series for me too. So
cool.
I really hope people check it out. Like if you like superheroes, what I've been telling people, it's like X-Men meets Final Fantasy meets Gundam, and like it's like kind of like a mixing of, like I said before, like all the comics and anime and video games that I loved growing up, kind of like all those vibes kind of mixed into one in this sort of big action-packed adventure story.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You
I
just
got
said
good
a
vibes
mouthful.
from the art that I saw.
That's like a geek buffet, man. X-Men and Gundam and the other one. Wow,
An
that's
all-you-can-eat buffet.
seriously. Seriously.
Yeah, my goal is like because I love video games like Final Fantasy where there's like a group of characters, and like X-Men stuff. And like, but I always felt growing up there was always like in a team of say like 8, there was always like 3 or 4 that were kind of like dopey characters that I didn't think were cool. And my goal with this was to make like a whole team like where every character could be the protagonist character in like some way. And like as we go through as we tell the story, like the protagonist, quote unquote, main protagonist is going to shift between issue to issue because like they're all important, they're all really cool, and like whoever you are reading this book, one of these characters will be your new favorite character. Like that was like our goal going into it, was that like one of these, like whatever you come from in life, one of these characters will speak to you and they will be your new favorite character. And that's kind of like the ethos that we had going into it.
That is an awesome idea, man. That is an awesome idea. I don't even think I've felt that way when I've read like a JLA comic. Like you always know like who's like leading the charge. So I love that idea. That's genius. I think you'll do very well with that. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Great idea. Wow, great idea.
Was there any nail biting going on before you actually got funded? Like I don't know how close.
Yeah.
What was it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. We had a higher goal. But like it was because that was the actual cost of what it was going to take to make the book. We weren't trying to make our goal like we weren't trying to be greedy or anything. It was literally like we went through and we tried every way we could to try to like cut costs in some way, but we didn't want to cut the quality. Like we wanted Andrew to be coloring it. I wanted to draw it. Like we wanted to have good printing quality. Like so it really came down to like and between the fees that crowdfunding takes and shipping's a huge factor in terms of, because that's part of that goal is the shipping. So we aimed at like what we thought was like
the hard
we could
number.
actually do. Yeah, the actual number where like we could all like actually do it, you know? So thank God we we did make our goal. It was right up to the end there because like I said, we had a higher goal and it's my first time running a Kickstarter. So I feel like some people like are don't know if like how reliable I am like with shipping and stuff. So I really want to get this book out by December for that reason. But like I said, because of factors that are out of my control and why we might have to push it back a few months, but it will be coming out no matter what. Like because like I said, it's all just drawn and written. That's done, and we got our letter pass by Josh Reed. The first round of letters came in, so like that like it will be done. It will be done. It just basically just depends on how fast we can get it colored.
I think most folks who are familiar with Kickstarter and have done it, I feel like people who've done it once do it more than once, and so they kind of know how it works, and they know that projects might be delayed a little bit, and I don't think they really get terribly excited about that. They just know that it's part of the creative process. So if you're a month behind what your original goal is, I don't think that's going to be like any big detraction.
Yeah, I hope not. Hope not. I hope everyone sticks with us. And
Yeah, they will.
yeah, and like I said, if you're just hearing about this for the first time, please go to the Indiegogo and check it out. If any of the stuff I said sounds remotely interesting to you, please go check it out. And if you want to back it, that'd be amazing. We seriously, from the bottom of my heart, like thank you for anyone who wants to back it. But if it's something you may not think it not is for you, but maybe you've got a friend who likes this kind of stuff, like please share it along. And anyone who likes like 90s comics or like anime or those kind of video games and stuff, like that's really what we're trying to get like those people that just want to have fun again with comics and like just that nostalgia, but not just nostalgia, where it's like you're having fun, like you're legitimately having fun reading books, and like
Right.
that's what we want to capture.
Yeah, good.
And there's eight protagonists, quality characters, which is very important.
There's yeah, well, yeah. I actually didn't. I'm not sure if I counted them out. In the first book, we've got I think there's like six that show up in the first book. Um, but there's going to be more as the journey goes on because it's like I said, it's going to be this big sort of sprawling kind of journey, like Lord of the Rings style is like what we've got plans for. We have the whole story mapped out. We're not sure quite yet how we're gonna break it up going forward, if we're gonna keep doing these like graphic novels or if we might switch to issue format. But we do have we have the whole story set out and we're like we know how it ends. We know how this whole thing ends. So
Hey, well, even Tolkien didn't know how he was going to format his book, Originally, he thought of it as an original, one giant tome, and then the publishers are like, "That's not happening."
yeah. Can you imagine it'd be like this thick?
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Now, Ken, for your Indiegogos, like, are you, when you decide to do that, are you obligating like 8 hours to do your comic work and then like 3 hours, like 11 to 2 in the 11 and PM to like 2 in the morning to do your own stuff? Like, how do you balance that?
I mean, so my days of staying up to 2 in the morning are pretty much over. Like I'm in bed these days by like 10:30 every night. But but yeah, it's really just about time management. A lot of like working on the weekends, like because I mean, in general, as a freelancer, that kind of happens no matter what. But it's kind of it has to. It's almost like setting apart days. Like because I'm one of those people that like I can't really multitask. Like I have when I'm doing something, I have to kind of just be focused on it. So like if it's a day I'm writing, that's pretty much all I'm doing that day. Or if it's a day I'm drawing pages, I'm just drawing pages, or if it's a day that I'm doing Kickstarter stuff, then it was a day that I'm writing up copy for Kickstarter, which takes way longer than like I thought it would, to rewrite and recheck. And I'm terrible with spell check and grammar. My wife is always like that's what she does for a living. So she's always like checking like stuff, and she's like, you capitalize the words that don't need it. It is terrible. You misspell stuff. She's like, so she like doesn't get how I don't see that stuff. But for me, like my brain like auto corrects it. So it's like when I'm reading something fast, like it's just like, oh, this is what's supposed to be. And I just keep gonna move forward. Where like for her, like it jumps out at her and she's like, this is like, no, this needs to be fixed. So she's like she's been our editor on this first book too.
That's a cool resource to have.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Is she going to be with you at Comic-Con?
She might. She usually comes like one of the days, so she might be there on Saturday or Sunday.
She'll be
She'll
like,
probably be there Sunday.
if she was there Friday, she'd be like, who is that disturbingly large man who insisted on embracing you for be like, oh, it's a long story anyway. But I would tell her, I'd be like, listen, your husband came on my YouTube channel and he's you could just tell he's a sucker in love, so he loves you a lot. And then, she might buy you dinner that night. I don't know. Um, I digress. Dude, I love that. I love everything you're saying. The Final Fantasy, the Gundam, like you're speaking my language. And having seen your art, I can imagine like how just it's going to be on the page. You know what I'm saying? Like
Hmm. Yeah.
for
And,
what
and
you're,
Gr-
go ahead.
I was gonna say, and Green Lantern is a big influence in it too. Like the concept of like light and dark. That's like a huge like our book is called Battle Chronicles Soul Striker, like soul like SOL, like the sun. And so like our hero characters are they're based around sunlight and they weaponize sunlight and their swords are powered with like solar energy. And so like they're
Wow.
fighting dark energy and darkness. So like the whole concept of like light and the darkness and good versus bad and light versus dark, like that's really baked into the story as well. So I feel like Green Lantern, and the mythology of Green Lantern, this is definitely a book that you will like too.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's so cool. Wow. That's so cool. Thank you for sharing that. I'm like downloading everything you're saying and I'm like, I feel better and better about it. That's super exciting. That's really cool. I'm super excited.
Thank you,
Um,
thank you.
no, thank you, man. And as regards like when you learned how to draw for comics, did you look at how did you do that? Like a cinematography book, how to change the angle? Because I've heard Greg
So
Capullo talk in the past about that. Like, how do you like, because I'm always like, how do you sit down and you're like, all right, if someone's not Alan Moore telling you, all right, we're on like a 45-degree angle, and there's like shoes in the background, like how do you know where
yeah.
because like for instance, Philip Kennedy Johnson can say, hey, this is an overhead or three-quarter look. Like, how do you
Mhm.
know what that looks like and how do you know the minutia of it?
So I actually prefer when people don't give me that direction. Like I like to like the more bare bones the script, the better in terms of like
You're a Marvel method
direction.
man.
Yeah, I really do like the Marvel method. I mean, I guess I like them breaking up by page. You know what I mean? I do like to say like page one, this is what happens. Page two, this happens. Because like if it was just like a paragraph for the whole issue, that would be like a whole nother challenge to break that down. But like I like it being broken by page and like and if necessary panel like but like I don't like when the camera direction stuff comes in because like I like to how do I put this? There's so many ways I can answer this question, but like I used to think of things in comics as movies, right? And I would think very like cinematically, but now I don't so much anymore. Now I try to think like what's going to make the best looking comic. And like I really like being able to like make one panel really big and like get like really great shots of the characters because I've come to this realization that like I think people buy comics because they like especially for the art, like you're buying it to see the characters look awesome, right?
Right.
Like there's so many great artists out there and they spend so much time and energy and I was one of them on like backgrounds like crazy amounts of backgrounds and like cars and stuff and like I just don't think readers are buying books for that. I just really don't like I get that it in the storytelling sense of where it like gives you that sort of film sort of immersion but that only in my opinion goes so far with comics like because you're not watching a film like as much as you're trying to replicate a film it's not going to be a film so like I've sort of shifted my mentality on that to being like I want to get the most dynamic angles and best shots of the characters as possible while also telling the story and being really clear with this what's going on with the story and so like for me the key to that is really switching up the angles as much as possible so it's like if I'm be that close to far or top to bottom or like or side to side like just really making sure that I'm not repeating angles in pages as much as
But
possible.
how, like that was my next question too, is it's like how do you know? Like, oh, I did this 3 issues ago. I did this
Oh,
angle.
I mean you're always going to be repeating in some sense, right?
Sure.
But like for me, it's not like just like making sure it's like not on the same page, like making sure that like on the same page, like you're not constantly doing like profile shots for every, you know what I mean? And like there are some artists who do that or some writers who write like that, and to me, it's like, and you can tell it's very much trying to replicate like a film, right? Like if you've got like a 9 panel grid, and it's like the whole thing is the same character's face talking, and it's like different facial expressions. It's like what they're trying to convey is the character's facial expressions throughout the talk, right? My opinion, me personally, I would rather do like a splash page of like the whole character just looking like really cool, and then just throw all that dialogue on the side. Like so, it's just like a different kind of like it's a different kind of interpretation of like what you're trying to get across and what you're trying to the kind of emotions you're trying to hit. And like what I'm trying to do with my books is like I'm really trying to just like hook that kind of like I'm not really going for reality. I'm going for like that sort of like hyper realism, hyper cool, hyper edgy, hyper just like fun kind of stuff, right? And so
Yeah,
like
you want
because like
hey, you are reading a comic book.
yeah, like my work is not like I'm not one of those guys who like not that I can't because I can draw super realistically if I want to, but it's like I personally didn't respond to those books growing up that were hyper realistic, and it's not something that I creatively like enjoy doing. So it's like it's just not something that for me works, right? And that's not to say like other people doing it isn't good. Like
Sure.
if
No,
because
sure, sure.
other people have different tastes, different flavors, different things they like. So it's if those are the kind of artists you like, obviously there's tons of artists who can do stuff like that are that and you probably wouldn't like my work as much because I'm so stylized, you know. So it's it's also up for interpretation, you know.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I at this current time I'm reading you ever read back in the day Knights like the Nightfall Saga or Knight's End?
Oh yeah. The Azrael stuff. Yeah.
Y- Yeah, yeah, Azrael. I
Yeah.
love Azrael. Like when I see it, I'm like, oh my God, Azrael. It takes me right back. It whisks me away. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm reading volume three because I read the first two omnibuses over the past year, and so I'm finishing up the third one. And I'm like, wow, comic art was so different at that time. And I remember being like, oh my God, this is so cool. And now, as compared to what I'm reading now, like even in the JSA book I referenced earlier, Michael Yanin, his art, like I was looking at one where it takes place in the future and it's Helena Wayne and Selena are in like Bruce's study. And like you could see the spines of the books. And meanwhile, the panels are only like this big and there's like four or five panels, but it's like this
Yeah.
hyper realistic. And it's like, wow. Whereas back then, it's like even the colors weren't as rich. It was kind of like, it almost looks
Yeah.
like coloring book, like colored pencil, like type
Hmm.
quality. And the facial expressions, like there was a lot of scratch and like like line shadowing, but it's not hyper realistic. And like when I go back and forth, I'm like this. But at that time, back in the day, like that was the jam. And so I was thinking to myself when I was reading when I was looking at his art earlier, I was like, I wonder if they're ever going to go back to the 90s, like raw, like toned down realism, maybe like a breakdown in
Yeah.
the background, and it's more about what's in front. So,
Well, I'm
Yeah.
thinking
Well, I mean,
when you were talking, I'm thinking Mark Silvestri from like late '80s kind of stuff, because he didn't fill in the backgrounds. There was a lot of
yeah.
dynamic stuff, and especially like work where he was colored by Wiacek, it was very like the foreground was the thing, and then everything behind was just kind of like just like a wash almost a lot of times, you
Hmm.
know.
Well, I
And
mean, a lot of that has to do with the coloring now too, because like I think you could make some of that art that you're talking about, like '80s Mark Silvestri or the '90s Batman. If you put like a modern colorist on it, it would look modern. Like because
Mhm.
like coloring is taking this huge leap where it's like
Mhm.
it used to just be like those flat colors with like inks, and now like colorists are like I think they add more to the look than people really give them credit for. Like they really define the look of
Mhm.
some art, you know?
Are you working digitally or are you working on paper?
Paper. I'm all paper.
Okay.
by the way, I meant to
Yeah.
tell you that too when you were talking. I love that you're doing paper. Um, like I think what somebody like Fabic does on his tablet is absolutely amazing. I'm like, how do you wow. But like
Yeah, I don't know how he
paper,
does it. Yeah.
dude, but paper is like, I'm old school and I just love paper because even I'll doodle sometimes, just be silly. So like just the feeling, like it's almost like transferring your life force when you draw, like you're touching it, you're breathing on it. Your energy is in everything you're doing. So
So is your colorist also working on paper or are they digitizing and then doing their deal?
The colors are all digital. That's
They
like the
yeah.
are.
thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we scan. I mean, they've been digital since like the early 2000s.
It's
They've
just
been,
how
or
it is,
even
huh?
even the 90s. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
they're all digital. Yeah,
Okay.
But the
yeah.
whoever's doing your inks, whoever gets the assignment for that particular project, you're sending them like the original, or you're sending them like a scan of it, and then they're inking your pencils.
So when I worked with other inkers besides myself, it was a little half and half. It was if they lived. out of the States or too far away, would do scans, and then they'd print them out on blue line copies and then ink them. But if they lived close or they're in the States, then I would actually mail the FedEx boxes of paper to them, and then they would ink right on the originals.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So no like original art sometimes. It's just like your art, ink, and there it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the art's still there. The original art's still there.
Right, right, right. But it's not like your
Yeah.
pencils, like, like listening to Rob Liefeld's podcast, he talks about how like like John Burns' pencil page, like he's got it in his collection. It's the coolest thing ever.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, yeah. So the ones where we do the blue line copy, my pencils are still intact as pencils, and there's like then the copy that's inked. So there's technically two stages of original art in that regard. But the ones where they ink right on the pencils, that's like the one page.
Do
And when
you
I ink myself, I just ink right on my own pencils,
No,
like right
sure,
on.
of
Yeah.
course. But like when you do you have a preference? Are you ever like, man, I really just want to hold on to the pencils because I love what I did with this? Or,
I mean, now just because like my pencils are so rough, like to me, it's like it doesn't feel finished until I ink it.
okay, that makes
So
sense.
like I never really think of it as being like, oh, I just want to keep it this way,
Yeah.
When I was doing it the other way, when my pencils were super tight, like I did, because at Aspen, they actually colored right off my pencils. So there were some times where I'm like, well, I maybe want to try that again. But yeah, I feel like inkers tend to do a better job and like doing it more on the original paper. I know the blue
Okay.
line, I've talked to inkers that like the blue, it's like it hurts their eyes, like the light blue against the white paper staring at it for so long. It's like it's more damaging to their eyes. So like
Hmm.
I know if you can send the original, it's much more preferred by everyone to just ink right on the original.
See, I appreciate that very much because that didn't come up with Sandra. So it's like you sharing that is like something that we didn't know before. So thank you for that. Do you use Lightbox like when you do your stuff or not?
No.
Yeah.
No, I have one. I used it for an animation project once. I tried doing the whole thing where like you light box your little thumbnail. Like, 'cause I know some guys like do like little thumbnails and then like scan them and print them out big and then like light box those. I tried doing that and like it just sapped the energy like right out of the art. So like I do little thumbnails just to send in for approval for like storytelling purposes. They're super rough, super sketchy, and then I just kind of eyeball it to the paper. And like to me, that's the fastest method. Like I've tried doing the digital thing too. Like I've tried just drawing digitally on my tablet, and like again, it's just so slow for me. Like I feel like I'd have to invest like a good like a month of doing nothing but like practicing digital to like get to a point where it'd be fast enough to like
Yeah.
do it. And
Very
then
much a
to me, it's
different
like
process.
yeah, and then also you have no original art at the end of the day to like sell. So to me, it's like I kind of don't really understand why anybody does it other than the speed factor. And then for me to get the speed factor would be all this time. So I really don't know.
Mm.
Okay.
I'm keeping it traditional now. And then if it gets to a point where like I one day I get like a big Cintiq or something, and then like I get really fast at digital, maybe that might be a switching point for me. But as of right now, I'm still doing traditional.
Now,
Cool.
just a couple of more things and let you go. And really appreciate your time, man. This has been an absolute delight. Thank you. Um, your setup that you got there, when you turn that light on, do you use like do you have like a magnifying glass that you like pull over it, or are you holding one to like get something,
I
or you just
No, I don't. Which probably like is bad for my eyes because like I used to have perfect 20/20 vision, and right around 26, I had to start getting glasses, and they've kind of been
Eh,
degrading since. So, but yeah, no, I don't. It's pretty much just two lights and a board and rulers and pencils and ink, and it's very very lo-fi, you know.
no, dude, I love
Oh,
it.
yeah.
I love it. I think that's so cool. I love how rustic it is because again, when I doodle once in a while, I'm the same way. Like I'm getting the lead on my hand and I got to wash it off. It's smearing on the paper. You know what I mean? I
Yeah,
love it.
my
Love it.
my one of my teachers in college had a book about Jack Kirby, and like in the back
Mm.
of the book, it showed his like drawing table, and
Mm.
it was like this like tiny little. It looked almost like a school desk, you know what I mean, like a
Mhm.
high school desk with
Mhm.
like this super uncomfortable looking wooden chair and this tiny little desk, and I'm like, man, if Jack Kirby could do all that from this
Mhm.
like zero level of comfort or like whatever, like should we all be able to do it? No.
And
I think
and a
I've seen
cigar.
that picture, and it's like it was all worn down, Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
and be like, "This is V Ken Marion with a cigar in his mouth, his best Jack Kirby impression." So yeah, yeah. Now, do you have anything like handy you could show us and share with us, or is it all hush hush or out of your
Uh,
way? Like, is it not handy?
um,
Is it not convenient for you?
I can show you some. I just had a book come out this week. It was called DC's. What's it called? I Know What You Did Last Crisis. Their Halloween book, and I did a story about Dr. Light, Kimio Hoshi. So I can show you
Okay.
some of those original pages. I got
Yeah, please,
those
please.
right here. Yeah. So we got
Whoa,
these
dude,
right.
those
Yeah,
are
it's
beautiful.
Oh wow.
the
So you
11 by
drew it.
17.
I was gonna say, and you drew it on that? Like that's the original?
Yep, this is the original art right here. Yep. I will
Dude,
have these
that's
with me at New York Comic Con if anyone wants to check them out, and they will
Okay.
be for sale.
All right.
Yeah, she's a cool character. Yeah, it was a fun 10-page story that we got to do. Um,
and that that
Nate,
the is that something that you like someone was a writer but you were able to design it, or were those
Nathan Kanan wrote it. It was based. So the idea with the whole book was that it's kind of going through the eras of the different crises and telling like spooky horror stories throughout it. So
sure?
our era was like the 80s when Dr. Light was on the Justice League, like that era. So I got to draw her in her 80s costume, Power Girl in her 80s costume, Martian Manhunter in the 80s style. So it was very much in that like 80s kind of like look for everything.
But were you like, hey, I got this, like, and you designed the pages, or what was it?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So it's like it's pretty much any script that is it's like, it basically just says page one, this happens, panel one, this happens, panel two, this happens, and then like it's up to us to decide how we're going to tell that story by like size of panels, angles, all that
Okay.
stuff. As an artist, that's all up to us. Yeah.
Super cool. And I'm sure you've heard it in the grapevine because it's like folklore now. But I remember, when Greg Capullo came from working with Toddy, at Marvel, then he went to Image, and then
Hmm.
he's working with Snyder, and Snyder's,
Hmm.
giving him an encyclopedia what he wants him to draw, and he's like, you know,
Hmm.
you've
Yeah,
heard that story, right?
I have. Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right. So, Greg actually came a number of years ago to my local library here, and he
Oh,
actually
nice.
he actually stood in front of a crowd of like 100 of us, and broke down the whole story. It was super cool.
That's
Um,
awesome.
oh, it was super cool. It was super intimate, super fun, and he's such a nice guy.
He
Um,
lives up there, right? I think he like lives
he
over
used
there.
to, he
Yeah.
used to, he used
Yeah.
to live in Schenectady, but now he lives in Arizona. And I was telling Scott that because this was like right before he moved, because the Guilderland, Albany, it's basically Albany, but it's Guilderland. The library's like right between Schenectady and Albany. So it was like perfect.
That's
Oh,
just down the
cool.
road from your house.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
10 minutes. And he was selling prints and like autographing them, taking pictures. But the point being is he was saying how with Todd would be like, all right, bud, I need Spawn under the bridge, and yeah, this is what's happening. And then, he would just draw based on just Todd's like 3 or 4 words. And then he
Hmm.
gets with Snyder and it's like an encyclopedia. And like everybody knows now when you work with Greg Capullo, this is how it should be. Is the word
Hmm.
out with you? Like, do you get that space, or does it depend on the prestige of like the writer that you work with?
I mean, I think it depends on like how well known you are for your working method. I try my best to interpret the scripts that I get as much like I want to get the writer's story across as much as possible. But like if there are certain things that I think I can change or whatever, or add a panel or take a panel away or whatever, I've always like whenever I send layouts in, like I've never really gotten kickback on that. Like I feel like I mean I don't want to toot my own horn or whatever, but like
Oh, go
I
ahead.
feel like I feel like I'm a pretty good storyteller because I don't get a lot of people like changing my layouts. Like editorial, like they seem to always be pretty cool with like what I send in and they never really get too much feedback on it. Like
Cool.
so yeah, I mean the more you work with writers, obviously the more comfortable it gets. But yeah, I mean I'm flexible though. Like if I get a super dense script, I usually don't because like it's more work for the writers to do, and they usually I think most people know not to do these like crazy dense scripts. But like even if I get that, it'll take me longer to break it down, but like it's still not that big of a hindrance. Like I can do either way, you know.
Hmm.
Well, you're such a nice guy. I can imagine like me writing a script and not being familiar, and then you're like sitting there like, Gotta call this guy and tell him, like how do I do this? Be like, listen, buddy, you know, like I don't need to draw like all 10 skyscrapers. I'll throw 3 in the back and then you tell me if you like it. I'm sure you'll love it. And they're like, oh, I love it. So, like
Yeah.
that.
I mean, for me, like the biggest hurdle is like when there's so many panels on a page and like multiple of the panels could be like the money panel. And like that's hard to like determine like where do you want the impact to be. And sometimes like, and this happens a lot actually, where it's like when I'm first reading the script in my head, I'm thinking one thing is like the money panel that like I want to draw, but for the story
Mm.
sense, it has to be something else. And like you always gotta go with like the story, what makes the story better. So there definitely have been multiple times where I'm like, man, I could have made this one really cool shot of the character's face or something, but like you got to give it to something else that might be like more hard to draw, like which is like a big action shot with this like big background and stuff. So
Kind of
Super.
like the adage for a movie is when you pay attention to the special effect, you just lost the story. When
yeah,
you've got
yeah,
some kind of
yeah,
a showcase thing, and it's like, wow, did you see that special effect? That was amazing. Everyone just stepped outside of the story, so it
yeah,
kind of actually blew it.
yeah.
Have you and we ask every time, at least as far as we remember, we try to do it a lot. Have you met Rob Liefeld?
I have. I've worked for him actually. I
You've
did.
worked for him. Like when? How
Yeah,
long
yeah.
ago?
It was for. I want to say it was a year ago or 2 years ago. He did Brigade #1 remaster and Prophet #1 remaster. Was it Brigade? Yeah, Brigade and Prophet remaster. So it was like he took the first issue of Prophet and the first issue of Brigade and basically reached out to artists that he liked, and we each kind of reinterpreted a page. So everyone got one page to draw in their own style and
Cool.
reinterpret. So it was like I know Clayman was on there, Victor Bogdanovic was on there, and I was one of the guys he reached out to, and yeah, he's super cool. I love Rob. I think Rob is it's such a like positive force for the industry in
Yeah,
terms of like what he brings to the industry, and like he was great to work with, like and super cool dude. And yeah, I think Rob's awesome. I love his podcast too. I listen to it every
totally.
week. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
yeah,
Big
Rob's
fans.
amazing.
Yep, big
You
fans.
guys, oh my God. And then he was my inspiration for getting my Blue Yeti mic,
Nice,
because
nice.
he's like, and my son hooked it up for me, he says.
I'm
Um,
I
totally,
wish I,
I'm totally disallowed to listen to his whatnot shows because every time I do, I end up opening my wallet.
yeah, 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 yeah. No, and Rob was one of those guys that like inspired me when I was a kid. Like he's one of those artists that like I've tried to emulate and try to draw like and like in his energy and his creativity is like so like it's so amazing that he's able to just keep generating these ideas, these new characters, and like still to this day, he still has the same level of enthusiasm and energy. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know how he does it because like I'm constantly tired. Like from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep, I am tired. And Rob just never seems to be tired. So like God bless
yeah,
him. Like whatever,
he does his
whatever
podcast at like 4:30 in the morning or
Yeah,
something.
high energy guy for sure.
that's
Yeah.
insane. Yeah, I
Yeah.
just I'm dying when I wake up and aching to go to sleep every night.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's I don't know how he does it. Scott and I will talk from time to time on a really good one that really hits home and be like,
Yeah.
man, did you hear that? Yeah, that was so funny. And I love his Todd impression. I mean, whenever he
Yeah,
does
it's
the
really
Todd
good.
impression, like I chuckle within myself. And I met him at Comic-Con last year and I told him how much I love the show. And he was like so happy that I love the show. He was so enthusiastic. And then I was like, I love your Todd impression. And then he starts doing Todd
Oh
on the
wow.
spot. And then
That's
I was like
awesome.
trying to do mine too. And it was just like it was a hoot for like 3 seconds. It was a lot of fun. So
That's awesome. Yeah, last
yeah.
year at Comic Con, he actually like he was walking down Artist Alley and he actually came up to my table and he was like, "Hey Ken, how you going?" And I was like, "Oh my God!" Like it was just so cool that like he came to my table and like and just stopped to chat for a little bit.
That
It
is
was so
cool.
cool. Like
That's
That's
very
yeah.
super
cool.
cool. We passed Scott and I went last year and we passed by your table, but your head was down and you were furiously at work on whatever you were doing. And I'm like, I know that guy from Digging for Kryptonite. And
Oh
I
well,
yeah.
you should stop me. Yeah, because anyone who sees me at a con, if I've got my head down, just feel free to come up and say hi.
Well,
Because just
now I feel like I can. I'll
yeah,
be like,
Yeah.
Ken, hey,
yeah,
me. So you're like, oh, hey. You might put your head back down and I'll, but I don't know. So
yeah. No, no,
no,
no.
I
definitely there that's what I'm there for, is to talk and to hang out with people. So
No, you have a wonderful disposition because, as you've heard on Rob's show, he's like, "Oh my God, when I was a kid, like John Byrne didn't want to talk to anybody, and this guy was a
uh,
jerk, and that guy, and this and that." Whereas you have a great disposition. I'm sure people love chatting with you. So as we have.
Yes,
So
absolutely. Thank you so
thank you
much.
for
thank
making
you.
time, man.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, man. This is so much fun. And I hope to see, are you both going to be at New York this year?
I'm not
Scott,
going this year, but Brian's going with a cohort of ours.
yeah,
Cool,
yeah.
cool.
Our part-time editor, Jonathan. So one either he'll be with me or not, but I'll definitely like Artist Alley is like my peanut butter and jelly. Like I go there basically for that. I just love it. And I love looking at all the things and like, it's inspiring.
Yeah,
It's like being on like Comic Book Survivor, but there's no competition. It's just kind of like you're like, oh my God, you're on like it's you're in your element, So
yeah,
I
yeah.
love it.
It's
Cool.
it's it's very cool. It's a fun time for sure.
Now,
Awesome.
one more thing, because as I thought of Artist Alley, sorry. Do you have your stand, like your thing that says like V Ken Marion, blah, 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 like
I do have one of those, yeah, for shows and stuff. It's got like I've got a couple different ones. I've got one that's a Green Lantern banner, and I've got for the shows that have got like more space. I've got a giant wall of like my prints and stuff, and I've got like a big sign that's got my name with like the Soul Striker logo next to it too. So I've got different setups for different show environments.
now are those printed on like cardboard or are they like canvas?
No, they're no, they're just the prints, and I've got them taped together, and they're just hanging like
Super cool.
crossbar. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for being so kind and so sweet. And the stuff you shared tonight, like I'm even more invested now. So thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much. Like I really appreciate being here.
All right, talk
Great
to you
talking.
soon.